So, thanks for the talk. Very interesting. So I have two questions. First of all, maybe you have answered it to investor many times. Can you give a quick comparison between XB1 and the Concord and the Soviet to 144? What makes it boom and your customers believe XB1 will succeed and do better than the other two from both technically and economically? Especially economically, so XB1 will only carry 55 passengers, much less than Concord, right? So how do you make money for the airlines? More expensive air tickets? And what's the estimation of the price if we cross Atlantic in XB1? Second question, so you mentioned in your last part of your talk, you mentioned actually everybody is looking forward to a supersonic passenger flight, airplane. The passengers, airlines, and even capitals are looking forward to that. Why Boom does it? Why Boeing and Airbus do not do that? Thank you.
Cool. So first question is, why is this better than Concord? And the second question was, why doesn't Boeing and Airbus do this? What's different is, like, we're Concord with a business model that works. And so, by the way, to be clear on terminology, XB1 is our prototype. So that's the 1/3 scale thing that'll look like a fighter jet but fly like an airliner. And then this guy is Overture. So this is the 55-seater. So if you look at the business dynamics around this, so Concord was a 100-seat airplane, and in today's money was $20,000 for a round-trip ticket. And you just can't find 100 people who want to spend $20,000 to go somewhere. And so the seats would fly mostly empty. In the airline industry, there's this thing called load factor, which is percentage of the seats that are filled. And it's if you go build a spreadsheet model of an airline business, you find that that's the thing that matters more than anything else. So when a seat flies empty, it's like perishable goods. Like, it's $0. Like, even getting $1 would be better than zero. And so Concord at $20,000 a seat, with 100 seats to fill, ran until they announced it was shut down, and everyone wanted to go. It was running at about a 25% load factor. So it's like you're buying your seat and the 3 empty ones next to you. For that reason, it barely worked New York to London. So British Airways did make money New York to London, but it would not have worked at any other route on the planet. And so there's just no economy of scale. It's a specialized fleet of an aircraft. So if you say, well, what do you have to do to fix this? Fundamentally, it's two things. Number one, you got to improve the fuel economy of the airplane, because that was the big driver behind the high fares. So you got to get the fuel burn down such that the cost profile looks more like subsonic business class, which we know is a price point that people are willing to pay. Think like $5,000 round trip New York to London, and then you got to right size the airplane so that the airlines can get a good load factor, not just on the most common routes, but on hundreds of routes around the planet, so you can get some economy of scale. And so the way we think of this is, let's think about the larger Boeing and Airbus aircraft, 777 or 787, and you just chop off the front part of the airplane and make it go really fast. And so, that's 55 to 75 seats, on a 787 or 777, depending on exactly how the airline sets it up. And we're at that price point. So if you can fly those airplanes and fill the seat and make money, then you can do the same thing supersonic on the same routes. And now there's a market for 1,000 to 2,000 airplanes instead of like 14 like Concord. On the why Boeing and Airbus don't do this, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, but to summarize it, it's an innovator's dilemma situation. They have to go after the biggest market with the least risk, and they can't cannibalize their own business. It's a very, very special large company that's willing to eat its own businesses. And so Boeing is, I would say they're technically capable of doing this, but they're not strategically capable. Like, if you're the CEO of Boeing and you pitch this to your board, instead of doing a bigger opportunity that's less risky, you get fired.
I think you'll know the numbers better than I will, but to put some numbers on it, do you know what the backlog is on 787 Dreamliners versus the total market size for Boom? If I remember correctly, it's something like Boeing today has 1,500 to 2,000 back order. They just need to build those planes, and the airlines want them. And that starts to butt up against the total market size for Boom. So if you put on your CEO hat, CEO of Boeing, how do you go to your board and how do you go to the stock market and say, hey, we're not going to do this thing, and we already have the planes booked and the airlines want them, and there are probably a lot more planes to build on the other side of that. And by the way, we already know how to build those planes that are approved, and we just have to manufacture them. Instead, we're going to go after this thing where we haven't even built the plane yet. And so you have a very, very classic innovator's dilemma of like smaller market, more risk versus bigger market, less risk. And so you just can't justify it. I don't know if I got the numbers right, but.
Yeah, the narrative is correct. And it's, on the order of 1,300 to 1,500 units for the Dreamliner. And then the next thing they're doing, the 757 replacement, they're kicking around, 4,000 to 5,000 units. So this is a perfect example of a business that looks like a horrible idea if you're a big company. It looks like a great idea if you're a startup.